read it, but she sounded, I couldn't remember what the accent, it was so
Hi everybody, good evening, buenas noches, and welcome to Creative Conversations. My name is Suzy, I'm the President and Executive Director of Creative Capital, and for those of you who don't know enough about us, since 1999, Creative Capital has funded the work of some of the country's most influential artistic voices, from visual to performing arts, from literature to moving image, to our ever-evolving emerging fields category. Our 642 awardees have helped advance our understanding of often complex and daunting topics, such as we will hear tonight. We surround these bold, creative individuals with a support structure that includes strategic planning, advisory services, a network of arts professionals, and convening events like this one. It is our hope that these creative conversations would help build bridges among artists, activists, policymakers, and thought leaders working around similar issues, and that they will position art and artists as integral to realizing personal, social, and legislative change. The four creative artists tonight on our panel are using their work to address issues around urban settings and the built environment, including gentrification, affordable housing, the brownfield remediation, and the foreclosure crisis. These artists are varied in their perspectives, but united in their belief that art is a valuable means of illuminating and intervening in the most pressing social issues of our time. Don't we need our artists more than ever now, right? I hope you will visit our website, creative-capital.org, to learn more about all of our artists and how you can support their work. But to get going, we want to say thank you and very grateful to the San Francisco Art Institute for partnering with us to present this program and for hosting us in this great theater. We, of course, also want to thank our presenting artists, Ben, Carmen, Liz, and Sharon, who you will hear more about soon for sharing their work with us. And of course to Moy Eng, who is the Executive Director for the Community Arts Stabilization Trust, for moderating our conversation. And to help us kick off the program, I'd like to introduce Hesse McGraw, who is the Vice President for Exhibitions and Public Programs here at the San Francisco Art Institute. Hesse?
Thank you, Suzy. It's a huge honor to partner with Creative Capital here at the San Francisco Art Institute. As we all know, Creative Capital is one of our foremost champions of artists, and so welcome to San Francisco. So it's also my distinct honor tonight to tell you to silence your phones. We are live streaming this event, and there are, I believe, many, many people across the globe watching this event, and during the Q&A, we'll invite them to join us in conversation with the artists. I wanted to highlight a few connections that San Francisco Art Institute has with Creative Capital. So our current exhibition, which some of you saw, Mel Ziegler's work Flag Exchange, which is part of a show called A Living Thing. Mel was in the inaugural cohort of awardees of Creative Capital in '99 and 2000, along with our faculty member Maria Elena Gonzalez, who's here. I think Mel will actually be joining us towards the end of the talk. He's flying in tonight from Nashville. And our next show is by Katrin Sigurdardottir, who is a 2014-2013 Creative Capital awardee. Her show opens on May 11th, so that's coming up. I'd invite you back this Friday. Mel's exhibition is opening. And then throughout the semester, every Tuesday night typically is a lecture. So those flashed up on the screen as you were getting seated. But those events really were inviting artists who are at the forefront of our field. Unavoidably, the conversation around artist space and the need for space has been at the forefront of the dialogue in the Bay Area. And I hope I'm not scooping you, Moy, but there was a very troubling statistic that came out about a year ago. The San Francisco Artists Commission did a survey of 700 artists, and they found that 2/3 of them, within a 6-month period, had been displaced or were facing immediate displacement. So when you consider the severity of that statistic set against ghost ship, this is an issue that's at the forefront of all of our thinking, and it's exciting tonight to be welcoming artists here who are approaching this topic with ingenuity and creativity and new ways of thinking, and to hear directly from them. So thank you all for coming. And now I'd like to welcome Moy Eng, who's going to serve as our moderator tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Hesse, and thank you, San Francisco Art Institute, for hosting. Thank you, Creative Capital, for hosting this, you'll hear, this profound and intriguing conversation. I'm Moy Eng, and I'm the executive director during my daytime life of the Community Arts Stabilization Trust, otherwise known as CAST. CAST is a startup, 3 years old, and we are in the business of creating safe, affordable, permanent space for artists and arts organizations in San Francisco and Oakland. So that's our business. How did I wind up here? I've spent 3 decades of my life in New York and in the San Francisco Bay Area around building and increasing infrastructure for artists and arts organizations to create their work, whether it's contemporary and in the moment, to our esteemed traditional culture bearers who carry with them their culture and share it with us. So for the first 3 decades, it's been all about invisible infrastructure around that lovely, crass but necessary word, cash, and leadership. And the third piece is space, physical space. And that's my work with CAST and my focus. So without further ado, what we will hear tonight are presentations, about 10 minutes each, you'll hear from our esteemed 4 artists, all Creative Capital, talking about their work that's profound, intriguing, provocative, but I'll let them speak about it. And then what we're going to do is go into a brief conversation amongst the 5 of us. There will be a little bit of stagecraft business with chairs coming out so that we could face each other and actually have a conversation. And then we're going to turn the dialogue and the conversation to embrace all of us, both on the stage, off the stage, in real time, as well as in digital time. So, is that relatively clear? Cool. So I have the honor and pleasure of introducing all 4. And this first one is Carmen Montoya. Carmen is a new media artist working in performance, sculpture, and installation, and is part of the artistic collective Ghana ThinkTank. You're going to hear more about Ghana ThinkTank in a minute. Carmen.
Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks so much to Creative Capital for making this possible. I'm super excited to tell you about our work. Ghana ThinkTank is an international artist collective, and we are developing the first world. We are doing that by attempting to flip the power dynamic of the international development model by allowing people living in the so-called third world to intervene in the lives of people living in the so-called first world. Christopher Robbins and John Ewing and myself were the US-based facilitators of the project, and we all worked in, how should I say, the fringes of international development and saw sort of the dirty underbelly of good intentions. This project is in part a way to respond to the hubris and paternalism of that model. We have a very brief time here, so I'd like to start off by showing you guys a short video that will help sort of contextualize the project and the process. Next slide, please.
There's a lot of children that are a little overindulged, and and adults that are overindulged.
Liverpool City Council is composed of cohort suits.
I am getting old and I want to be young. I am getting fat and I want to be thin. I would like to have sex instead of dreaming about sex. Well,
How do you find your passion?
the kids driving around with that crazy boombox and that truck, so that costs.
My problem is that I'm never happy.
We've collected a lot of problems. People like to talk about their problems.
This is a problem, and this is a racial problem.
Una de las cosas que más admiro de Estados Unidos de la cultura.
Say if you're white or if you're black.
See, the beginning, I will learn right from the beginning, let's not implement this kind of teachings to the kids. When I look at the camera, they can tell me. Only me, and we come along with Banyaje, when she let me. Now, make a be here. No one will come along, I'm filming. I'm a Jew, I'm a characters be. No, let my label. I'm a go from a name, she's on the film of the
Както доведемо без спорт, него затворено за средимо по Враге, recimo. I sad oni ne mogu tamo, nisu dobro došli to. I šta da radimo da zatvorimo bez sport?
The question. Who is it that decides it is a true or false idea?
Y quizás definir bien si tienen no sé cuántas millas de canchas de golf, pues que especifiquen una donde pueden hacerlo y en sus casas que no usen pesticidas, que se dediquen a disfrutar, que crezcan, si son flores hasta les van a adornar el espacio de la grama. Para mí eso sería el consejo.
The solution was very interesting to me, and it was the suggestion that we rename our dog Love.
That was a really fun one, I have to say.
No son en la ventana del vecino para que entienda que ya la mascota dejó de ser el problema y el problema ahora somos nosotros. O sea, yo creo que al final de cuentas, lo que siempre he dicho, la tolerancia.
Next slide, please. So we've been working on this project since 2006. And over the years, we've been modulating our process to sort of meet the needs and the context of the work that we're doing. And more often now, we find ourselves focusing on issues of sustainability and community impact. Our current project, the American Riyadh, was born in the Moroccan village of Tasultante in 2013. Shortly after violence erupted in the Middle East over the YouTube video, The Innocence of Muslims, the U.S. State Department and the Bronx Museum selected Ghana ThinkTank to work as cultural ambassadors in Morocco. Using this donkey cart, which is still a common form of transportation in the area, we were able to create a mobile media lounge and tea lounge that, using solar panels, which you can sort of see in the image there, we brought an array of problems that we had collected throughout the United States and went to rural villages asking Moroccans for help solving American problems. Next slide, please. The problem that most resonated with the Moroccans was this problem of American social isolation. The Moroccan think tank pointed out that our architecture is a cause of our problem. Next slide, please. The American dream, they said, is a single-family home with a fence. Even in cities, you find ways to hide from each other, to isolate yourselves from each other. They explained that building homes around a shared courtyard with a shared entrance would help promote interaction, neighbors knowing each other, and ultimately alleviate this very serious problem. Next slide, please. We began researching the architecture of the Moroccan riad and how and where a solution like this would be not only feasible, but most useful. And admittedly, this was like a total bucket list project for us. And then we were invited to do a site visit in Detroit. And there, amongst the abandoned single-family homes, Detroit residents talked to us of not only being isolated from social services and economic opportunities, but also from each other as neighborhoods became less and less populated. Next slide, please. We've partnered with 3 neighborhood organizations on the north end of Detroit, the Oakland Avenue Artists Coalition, the North End Woodward Community Organization, and Affirming Love Ministries, to buy these 2 buildings and the empty lot between them. On the bottom half of the screen, you see one of the earliest models of the riad project. Here's another more elaborate riad design that we drew great inspiration from. The courtyard is designed to be made of these repeating arches, and this is one of our modules. Oh, sorry, next slide, please. Yes, this is the repeating arch. Next slide, please. This is one of our early 3D models, which we used to go out into the community to talk to people about what the plans were for the site. Next slide, please. The final design creates a mixed-use place, including commercial, residential, and educational units that are built around a shared public courtyard that will act as a site for community events. It's beautiful. And we know what work like this can do to a community. So a key aspect of the project is dealing with the fact that art is often used as a tool for gentrification, and that well-intentioned outsider interventions such as this can often, backwards please, can often result in the displacement of people. So we're forming a community land trust, and there's a deed restriction that will guarantee affordable housing as well as limit speculation. Next slide, please. This is our first prototype. It is made in vacuum-formed plastic. We installed it last spring. Next slide, please. And this gave us the opportunity to create a big ruckus. People were able to learn about the project as they walked by, becoming very curious. And it also allowed a very important thing, and that's to get feedback from the community. Next slide, please. The abandoned house next door required a complete gut rehab. Next slide, please. Working with students from Purchase College who generously supported the project, and community members, we began prepping the inside of the house. Just this month, we were able to connect with the people who used to live in this home and are now going to be able to return many of the things that they left behind. Next slide, please. Many people who just happened to be walking by on one day, like Sean and Carol, were really curious, stopped by, and joined the project as paid employees. Next slide, please. This winter, we've been working with Williams College and the Williams Museum College of Art and the faculty of Williams College and the students to install a structural version of the original prototype, this time in metal. At the end of the exhibition, which opens tomorrow, we will disassemble the pieces, move them to Detroit, and they will be installed as the first permanent part of the riad. In addition to the architectural intervention, we're working with people from the Zilka Center for Environmental Sustainability on Williams campus to design and establish a water catchment system. There will also be a skills building initiative as part of the program to train community members in the skills that were required to not only design, but construct the riad. And then finally, we're also doing an oral history project because it's not just the land and the buildings that we want to save. We're really interested in preserving the history as well. Next slide. The challenge of this kind of work is that it takes so many partners. But what's super exciting about this kind of work is that it takes so many partners. And so if there's anybody out there who wants to join a team or has any really good ideas for us, we're really happy to hear any kind of feedback or suggestions. Yeah, and with that I leave you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carmen. Next, Ben Beres. Ben is one of 3 artists involved in the collaborative SuttonBeresCuller. They're dedicated to a form of public, multidisciplinary art that is generous in nature, participatory for the willing, and refreshingly free of dogma for the uninitiated. Ben?
Thank you. That's John Sutton and Zach Culler, and we all met. It's also, thank you for having us here. It's an honor to share the stage with these awesome artists. We met in the 90s at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle, and we create sculptures, performances, mobile projects, working with a variety of material. And where we really excel is with installation and having time to sit in a space and to work out all the details. Next slide. In 1962, Seattle had the World's Fair, and that brought all sorts of excitement and advancements for Seattle. Next. And the monorail was installed. And it's if you've been to Seattle and been on the monorail, it's very short. It's still as short as when they installed it. In the 90s, they decided to expand, and it was going to be a 14-mile, 17-station route. Everyone was really excited about it. And we received a grant for this space, which was in Ballard 15th and 85th, and we were going to do a project called Mini Mart City Park, where we're going to basically put a park inside this Mini Mart, rip out holes in the roof, and there was a possibility that it was going to stay around for 6 months. So it was a temporary project. We were really excited about it, but after 8 years and 5 voter initiatives, they decided to dissolve it and not expand the monorail. So we sat on the idea for about 3 years, and we started looking at gas stations. Next slide. And we were looking all around, and there are tons of these. 3 years later, in 2008, we received a Creative Capital grant to continue the project. Next. And we found this little beauty. It's across the field from Boeing, across the street from Boeing Field in the Georgetown neighborhood of Seattle. Next. And it was pretty dilapidated. We had called a bunch of other oil companies that had these abandoned gas stations, and this was the only owner that got back to us. It was a mom and pop station that held 2 20,000-gallon tanks for Boeing during the war. It became a laundromat, and then ironically, it stored equipment for environmental cleanup after that. So 5,300 square feet, pretty small, but the idea with this project is to retain this gas station identity and also make an art space and a park in an area that doesn't have a lot of green space. Next. This is it in the 30s. It's super cute. Next. And we start dreaming about what we can do and how we can turn this space into something unique. We find that there are 700 in the Puget Sound alone, 200,000 throughout the nation, and that was due to regulations that came in the 80s. And so as artists, we're looking around. We didn't have a gallery. We didn't have space. We're looking at broken down, dumpy gas stations to use as properties, as like projects. Next. Here's some of the iterations that lasted for quite a while. Next. Next. So we get advised, we get an environmental lawyer, a few people have say, maybe you should check out and see under the soil. We had a letter from the Department of Ecology that was in the 80s that said no further action is required. And that was part of the sale with the previous owner. We come to find out that those letters are basically useless. They would dig a hole, sniff, and be like, you're good to go. So we engaged the King County Brownfields Association and the Environmental Protection Agency, and they showed up to this, and another sign we had was SBC and Mini Mart City Park, welcome the EPA, and they were so excited. They're like, usually we have to chase people down, and so they were like taking pictures. Next, ground penetrating radar to find if there were any more hidden tanks. All the tanks were removed. Next, and this probe that went down 16 feet. Next. So we were really excited. It was a big deal the first day, and I'll never forget coming around the corner. Next. And here they are with the samples. Next. And that's under our gas station. So there was a wave of diesel smell, and it was described to us as kind of a worst case scenario. All of the pollution is 15 to 16 feet below the ground and in the groundwater. And beyond the scope and size of our property. And also, there's a possibility that it's coming from other sites across the street with documented spills. So this begins a whole series, and remember, this is like 2008, a whole series of events of waiting and applying for more grants. At one point, we were denied 14 grants in a row, where it was like, we want the arts and environmental remediation to come together. And we're like, this is perfect. Next. So what we did, we started making work about the project and to kind of keep sane with it. This was a sculpture we made of one of the iterations, and we poured oil down on the floor below. Next. We had a series of events, installations, painting projects on the fence. This band, Awesome. Next. We had the bands Taco Cat and Japanther. Next. And then what we've done recently is we made a commercial and we're selling the dirt from the property. Next. Premium canned dirt. And next. Next. We're selling these for $25 a pop, and it was a way to like have fun with the project and also kind of get a little bit of an income from it, and every dollar goes directly into the project. You can see it says not non-toxic. Next. Next. And then you see the nutrition facts on the side. It has a lot of the chemicals that we found with the EPA and the King County Brownfields. And the concept with this was really to think about, our pitch was become a landowner, like help us like remediate this project one person at a time. We did some quick math and figured out that it would be 5,341,878 cans to get enough dirt out to actually clean the project. So we made a few thousand of these, and we still have some if anyone wants some. And we ended up getting, it was on the radio, we ended up getting a call from the Department of Ecology, because we're taking dirt from off the surface, which isn't contaminated, and they thought we were selling sludge, and they were a little worried about that. Next. So where we're standing at now, we recently received 2 amazing grants. One was from the Neighborhood Matching Funds for the City of Seattle, and the other one was through For Culture, which was cultural facilities. And we received our demo permit. The building was just rotten. Next. And so it came down this late spring. Next. And here is where it stands now. My girlfriend, she's watching. Hi, Amanda. We're very close to beginning. Next. We partnered up with an architecture firm called Go See Studio, and next, that was one iteration. We're sitting pretty well right now with this plan. We're 14th in line for our construction permit. We've raised a bunch of money lately. We're not quite there, but we're going to go through another round. This is going to be a really great flex space. Big walls open up. We envision sculpture and installation, writers, artists in residence, talks, and then this lovely little green space. And that's where we're at now. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ben. Now, Liz Glynn. Liz creates sculptural objects and large-scale installation events and participatory performances. Her work draws from different historical eras, architecture, and literature that seeks to explore individual agency within complex superstructures in the face of an increasingly abstract economy. Liz?
Thanks. It's such an honor to be amongst this group of artists and thinking about ideas of economy and space. So I'm Liz Glynn, and I'm here to present Golden. Golden will take the architecture of the Roman Emperor Nero's infamous pleasure palace, the Domus Aurea, next slide, pictured on the left, and slam it into a distressed property in the desert in the promised land between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. The installation will serve as the site for a series of weekend-long events asking the question, who gets to live the good life? In the context of the European austerity crisis, Grexit, Brexit, the mortgage meltdown, the financial crisis, numerous personal breakdowns in between, the project seeks to untangle the false dichotomy between corruption and pleasure, financial capital and desire. Next. When is enough enough? And what drives us to always want more, ever more? During the cycle of performances, Golden will be under continuous aspirational renovation. Next. In my work, ancient history often functions as a backdoor to a political conversation outside of the ossified binary democratic system we exist in. In 2008, I worked with a coalition of the willing to build Rome in a Day as the 24-hour Roman reconstruction project. Next. I often use recycled materials to create monumental forms. I'm interested in economies of means. How can I create something epic from the overlooked, and rather than accept a contractor's idea of what something should cost? Next. This pyramid was the site of 9 performances about irrational fear in the context of the financial crisis. I finished my MFA from Cal Arts in 2008 before we understood what 2008 meant. And each performance drew a theme from the Egyptian Book of the Dead to think about the idea of kind of puddle jumping through one's uncertain financial future to get through to the other side. Next. Back to Golden. So, in AD 69, after the Great Fire of Rome, Nero erected this pleasure palace between the Palatine and Aventine Hills on land that was formerly occupied by the Roman working class, but now was empty. Next. The house was notable as the first architectural use of concrete, taking the form of this epic domed octagonal dining room. Next. Nero constructed a faux pastoral landscape with indoor-outdoor features on this raised land, and the Golden House in the desert will feature a central fountain as well as a classical colonnade shown in this photo rendering. Next. So last summer, I began looking for real estate, and I want to share part of this process with you today, as I think it reflects some of the larger issues we're discussing. The LA residential real estate market has exploded over the last several years, and in turn, driven demand out in the desert 2 hours away where I was looking. I was seeking a distressed property, something someone had tried and failed with, on more than 5 acres of land with an existing structure, water and power to transform into the site. This area of the desert has alternative land use zoning and allows provisions for owner-builders like me. Next. My tendency is to bite off more than I can chew and work beyond what is manageable. I was talked out of this instance where the tenants had taken off part of the roof and then rained quite a lot, so there was mold all the way down to the ground floor. About $50,000 to repair that and just to get it back to not a health hazard. Next. This one had some issues. This is relatively common. Someone had torn out the drywall in a number of locations to rewire the house, but gave up halfway through. This well-intentioned but ill-fated situation was right up my alley, but the neighbors were a little too close and someone was driving through the yard. Next. This was utterly heartbreaking. The husband of the current occupant, who was in her 80s in poor health, had passed away, leaving 1,300 square feet of unpermitted additions and slanting stairs, series of rooms filled with stuff like the one on the left, which included her wedding dress in this pile. She needed the income from the sale of the house to relocate herself to a more manageable dwelling like a mobile home, but had no means to get herself or all of this stuff out. I did not take this on. Next. I ended up with something a little more manageable, though screwed up in its own way. This is the 1,300 square foot house in Johnson Valley, California, which had been trashed by a group of teenagers and had been unsaleable for the last 8 months because it was a mess. Do you want to see how I saw it the first time? Here we go. Okay, can we play this video? Okay, we're gonna start in the strangest of additions, which include a walk-through bathroom, the only way to access the master bedroom suite. Possibly the best drywall job I've ever seen, which I'm in the process of tearing off down to the studs because it's useless. Really creative ceiling plastering. Triangular platforms for satellite TVs in most of the rooms. This fireplace that is made of the boulders from the backyard and a kitchen. All the concrete outside is at different angles, and a kitchen that I just want to tear all the cabinets out, and pretty much every surface every time I go in there. But when I first saw it, I was like, it's got potential, we can work with this. And it's kind of fun to think about. So, but thinking about other people's great plans that didn't work out, trying to work with that. So next slide. The current plan is to take the front house and create it as a service cabin for the larger Golden house in the backyard in the empty land. I want to think about the idea of property ownership as an act of generosity rather than selfishness. I'm going to tell you a little about the acts that we might undertake. Next. Guests will stay in a series of small sculptural cabins. Next. Nestled between the boulders in the backyard. The idea is to build it up so 10 or 25 people can stay at a time. Next. The cabins are based on these tradition of creating follies or fake ruins in landscape. Next. And as someone that works with sculpture and performance, I've been asking myself for the last couple of years, how can making an object be an act of resistance and not simply a gesture of complicity in the capital system of production? So these are prototypes of furniture pieces and ceramic works for Golden that I completed at Art Pace in San Antonio about 2 years ago. Next. In my research, I learned the word bank comes from banca, or table. Banking was first viewed as a transaction across a table between two people, and thinking about banking as a relationship rather than an empty vessel to fill up alters your philosophy of money. Next. These cabinet pieces were based on furniture from the Medici Grand Ducal Furniture Workshop, originally intended as massive displays of wealth rather than functional cabinets. Next. At Art Pace, I activated them with a group of furniture movers who tipped them forward to show their emptiness, and an action like this might happen in the middle of the afternoon at the house. Next. Gilded tiles will form the walkway into the main house. Next. This is the tile for the bathroom based on a Roman block floor pattern. Next. And I've started making ceramic tableware in my studio in LA to be used for all the meals at Golden. We have a strict no IKEA policy, and even now while I'm renovating the house, in those crappy cabinets, all the dishes are things that I've made. As someone that studied archaeology, I have this innate fear that future generations are going to judge us on the accumulation of broken consumable ceramic that was never designed to last. Next. Fulfilling basic human needs has become this generative system for making sculpture. Just as I'm visiting the house, stripping down the drywall and stuff, I'm thinking about things like, oh, we need a trash can for the bathroom. I don't want to buy one. We're going to make it out of concrete, like next week. But I'm trying to make everything the slow way and reimagine these objects as I want them to exist, and hopefully as people come out to the house, that becomes part of the process and becomes more collective and not just me dreaming about it. Next. Nero's love of art was often held up as a sign of his corruption. The original walls of the Domus Aurea were lined with fresco. Next. Next several slides, you'll see a series of cast plaster fresco fragments I've made in the studio. These panels will be made in a larger scale to line the walls of the Golden House. Next. Guests will be invited in groups of 10 to 25, including an intergenerational mix of activists, artists, Vegas entertainers, people from the local community, writers, artists, from a range of ages and economic positions, but everyone will have access to the same richness of experience. There won't be like a crappy student cabin. Next. Each weekend will feature a range of events from elaborate meals and debaucherous spectacles in the evenings to guided meditations and conversations about pleasure. Programming might also include workshops on real estate and alternative finance. Next, central to the project is the notion of unstructured time. Guests will be asked to deposit their technological devices for the weekend with an emergency contact number and use this as an alibi to check out and explore their individual desires. Next. For me, the physical act of making sculpture, its slowness, its weight, it's an act that functions in opposition to the acceleration, the ephemeralization, and the limited attention spans which define our hyper-capitalist economy. This is a series of blind gestural exercises I made last year, thinking about what happens to the contemporary body under stress and how does it manifest physically? What do I do with our bodies, which we're inclined to forget? Next. Which brings me to Britney Spears. Weird. At the 2007 Video Music Awards, after drinking 3 bottles of tequila, this nearly somnambulant Britney Spears kind of stumbles out through what was supposed to be this huge comeback in a complete daze. I think this is fascinating as this involuntary moment of saying no, the point where the body, in spite of all this capital and management, will not perform. This will be reconstructed at the Golden House. Next. Most importantly, following a 9-month cycle of performances and perhaps in between events, I want to make this available to other artists and creative people, thinkers, as an escape, a refuge, a possibility. Can we reimagine our relationship to pleasure? Can we redefine wealth? And can we think about a different possibility, particularly in the last few months? So thank you so much, Creative Capital, for allowing me to be a part of this community and dream big. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. And for our final speaker for tonight, Sharon Bridgforth. Sharon is a 2016 Doris Duke artist and as well as a 2016 Creative Capital awardee. Sharon collaborates with actors, dancers, singers, and audiences live during performance as she composes moving soundscapes of her ritual jazz texts. Sharon?
Thank you, family. Who dat? My father. I am his New Orleans jazz. I am my mother's Memphis blues. I have 6 parents thanks to divorces and marriages. I am a child of the great African American migration, people that left New Orleans, Memphis, and Okmulgee in search of a better life for themselves, their families, the futures of all to come. My favorite writer, Isabel Wilkerson, author of The Warmth of Other Suns, said, "Over time, as I've talked about it over the years, I've come to realize that it's not about migration. The Great Migration is not about migration, and really, probably no migration is about migration. It's about freedom and how far people are willing to go to take it. I am from dreamers, fighters, raucous, hard-loving, self-determined Black people who gave up everything for freedom. I have spent my entire career trying to understand, honor, and grow through their stories, their resilience, their brilliance with my work." Isabel Wilkerson said, "They arrived invited, but not welcomed. They arrived making the least for the hardest work. They arrived consigned to neighborhoods that had been declining since the moment they arrived. Home is everything to us. In this country, our homes, our livelihoods, our lives have never not been at risk. At 58, after working like James Brown on the road as a touring artist for 24 years, in my 2016 Creative Capital application, I proposed to acquire and gift a home to an emerging artist, and to inaugurate that home with art-centered, community-engaged gatherings. I didn't consciously realize it at the time, but of course, I was proposing to give the thing that I wanted most, home. And then I got a call from Lisa Dent saying, "Sharon, are you sitting down? You've just received the 2016 Doris Duke Performing Artist Award." And now my wife and I are preparing to buy our home. We all sprawled out at old Kenny Sharp little piece of house, hanging out porch and window trying to fit. Let old Kenny Sharp talk and swing he stick, giving orders for to get his sippy cup and things. Right when old Kenny Sharp make his second round with the story of his Ethiopian great-granddaddy was a free merchant, he door bust open. In step Honey Pot and them. All heads swing to the light. Old Kenny Sharp paused mid-sentence. Honey Pot stormed to middle of the room where old Kenny Sharp sit. She knock over about 3 or 4 people, step on more. She get in there, bend down, look old Kenny Sharp in the eye, stare long, long and hard. Old Kenny Sharp stay paused, let Honey Pot take he in. Then just like that, Honey Pot and them turned, storm out, dusting down the road before anybody could say how do. The That Black Mermaid Man Lady Home Project will be in residence in the Artist House for a month before we turn the keys over. The primary vehicle for community engagement in the Artist House will be the That Black Mermaid Man Lady performance installation, which my daughter, Sonia Perryman, a 34-year-old artist with an MPH from UCLA, and I have created. The performance installation is made of stories and songs that I've written based on stories that Sonia has shared with me about her experiences of our family and the loss of so many of our elders. Sonia sings as she moves with audience witness participants through and to stations installed in the Artist House. The audio's up top, yeah. Periodically, I ring a bell and invite audience members that want a Dat Black Mermaid Man Lady Oracle reading to sit for a reading. Recently, 2008, MacArthur Genius Awardee Walter Katundu joined us as a collaborator. Walter will build the installation and work with Sonia to compose the music. This is one of my personal favorites by Walter. It's an ocean-powered instrument he calls Catching the Waves. On December 29th, my mentor and big sister, Lori Carlos, the original woman in blue in Indazaki Shange's For Colored Girls, died. Today is Lori's birthday. Lori was in Minneapolis in the loving care of a large community of artists that she raised when she died. Lori and I share a long history of experiences with emerging artists in Minneapolis. In fact, my original Creative Capital proposal was to build a tiny house and gift it to an emerging artist in Minneapolis. And now with Lori's passing, organically, my original proposal is circling back. It seems that the Artist House will premiere in Minneapolis instead of in California, where I live. Along with the performance installation, we will call on community expertise and self-determination to curate workshops such as home buying, financial planning, sustainable food gardening, creative practice workshops, cooking and story circles, and of course, house parties. We intend to gather people of African descent, Native Americans, LGBT, POC, immigrant, and first-generation folk of all backgrounds, and African American senior citizen church ladies like my mother. This project is supported by Creative Capital, the Doris Duke Foundation, Whitman Institute, one of the co-directors is here tonight, IDEX 1000 Currents, which is where my wife and I are artists in residence, and it is also the fiscal sponsor for this project. 2 of the staff members are here this evening. Brioxy, New Dramatists, Salvage Vanguard Theater, Minneapolis-based project co-producer Molly Van Avery, and an additional fierce posse of individuals. In 2018, Salvage Vanguard Theater Company in Austin, Texas, another city that Lori and I are deeply connected to, will produce the Dat Black Mermaid Man Lady show, which I shared a bit of text from earlier. And that piece is where the oracles from the oracle deck originate, and the text on the back of the oracle cards is from that script. The artwork is by Yasmin Hernandez. Recently, while brainstorming, Sonia asked me, what do I most want to offer with this project? It is this: connection and healing in an intimate, safe space that invites interaction and witnessing. I have a deck of cards with me, so I'm gonna pull a card and see what the mermaids want to say to us this evening. So let's see what happened. It's Sweetie Jr., and Sweetie Jr. speaks about clarity. And Sweetie Jr. Is inviting us to consider detoxing. And I would say in these times, our spirits, our hearts, our minds, our actions, the art we make, the love we offer, in order to do that in a most powerful and loving way, we best to detox. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Now we're going to take a minute, and we're going to do a little bit of stagecraft, as I mentioned. So take a deep breath. If you want to stretch, stretch. And we're going to bring out the chairs, come up and begin the conversation. And I hope you'll take the time, in addition to stretching or checking your quiet phone or electronic device. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, we're going to be opening it up really soon for conversation. So. First of all, that was amazing. So inspiring. So I wondered, I know this will be very non-intellectual. However, I might as well start there because I'm not. Each of you, in your own ways, have really addressed the whole question around home and space. And I'm curious how you define home And I'd like to hear a little bit more about how it relates, the linkage to your current work that you've just shared with us.
Well, I think I talked about that in my project, in my presentation, but what I'll add is I've come to realize that home is in my spirit, it's in my heart, and home is global. So people that I love live all over the world, and I carry them in my heart. And at this point in my life, I'd also like a physical, permanent residence that can host home for others, for art, for gathering, for love and connection.
So a quick follow-up question, why now at this point, when you've spent so much time around making memory, weaving story around sound and text, why now making it so physical and an actual space?
I inherited that. And so I think that I grew up with people that had to leave home because where they were from was, they were literally being killed, and they arrived in a place where they were literally being killed and unwelcomed. And so there was this mourning and loss that I could feel but didn't have words for a long time, and I think I tried to understand that through my work for a long time. So I think it's always been inside of me. It's like a blood memory, and it's also a physical life memory. And the quest for home in my lineage represents security for those to come.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of versions of home that are at work in our American Riyadh project. It serves, in a sense, as a home for the Ghana ThinkTank. It's a hub from which we will be able to operate over an extended period of time and essentially dwell. But we're also talking, and talking isn't the right word. It's a very deep interaction around the idea of home, what drives people from a place and drives them to come back. And I think that that's community. And so that is an essential pillar of the project there, is we're looking at not only financial sustainability, architectural sustainability, but sociocultural sustainability to build a place out of a space.
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, being in a collaborative trio and 17 years in now, when we first started, a lot of our work was about home, like actually about home and the shape of home. And the Sears portrait that we had, we've done tons of those, and like realizing that we quickly became a family. And so a lot of the spaces that we occupy, we call home, or when we go to do an installation, we're like, well, this is home for the next 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever that is. The word is fluid and slippery, but like I think when we're together, like in a space, that is what makes home for us.
And what you've done is embrace the entire community in that reimagining and creation.
Absolutely.
Cool. Sorry, I wasn't trying to put words. That's what I was taking away. Liz.
It took me a moment because I grew up outside of Boston, but I've now been in LA for over a decade and call it home. And part of what has allowed kind of the DIY performance scene that I came up out of is kind of a network of artists helping each other and using what space they had access to or was made available them to, and offering it to other artists directly rather than going through institutions. And so for me, like one of the major motivations in doing this project is thinking about how that I've been fortunate enough to have some really fantastic opportunities, but how can I leverage that to make the space available to other people that I've collaborated with in this extended community, and sort of how can we continue that legacy of these artist-driven projects, this artist-driven community, to make something that is sustainable in the future in a lasting way.
So, a question.
Hi, my name is Sophia enough to live here in San Francisco after being evicted by several art buildings. However, the art building I live in, and this is the question, is totally non-democratic, although built for artists. I myself is one of the subsidized renters, and there's subsidized owners, and there's market rate. And I myself and all of the other renters that are privileged to live in San Francisco, and it is a privilege to live here. We have no rights. And so it really is very oppressive. So in one hand, I'm very lucky, and the other artists in my art building, on the other hand, it's extremely oppressive because we're not part of the Homeowners Association since it was built as a condo. The woman that started this great art building, taking 15 years to get it built, did not in place some laws to protect us in terms of being able to live here because it doesn't expire with the city, but doesn't protect us as individual artists in our own home as lived workspaces in terms of having a voice, in terms of exhibiting in our common space and walls. So after going through this such experience, seeing that sometimes people get into conflicts, I wanted to know what you would do in your startup company as CAST to ensure that people can be equal even in a society that's hyper-capitalist. In other words,
That's at least a triple bulleted question. So, first of all, we probably need a land use expert. Then we need a real estate lawyer and a few other folks to answer your question. So I think I will do the best I can at this moment, and then we should probably take it, if you're quite serious, offline. So let me share with you what CAST does, and that'll give you some of the context in which I speak. So CAST, its focus is on workspace. So let me just start with that. That's what I've come into. Secondly, the focus has been on creating affordable, safe, permanent space for arts organizations, small and mid-size. So while I love the opera, I love the ballet, we can go on with the big ones, that this is where the real need, especially at this moment, given that we live in one of 15, as you well know, one of the top 15 cities in the world that the dubious honor, that are most expensive. So what do? We have been using, from that standpoint, taking a look at models that have worked in affordable housing, environmental land trusts, to address the purchase and the acquisition of buildings and properties, and then, and you've heard this elsewhere with one of our esteemed speakers, using deed restrictions so that they are kept as permanent assets. With regard to live work and with regard to rights, I think that's a larger question we should probably take offline that is very specific rather than talk formulaic and theoretical, because I don't think that would be helpful and it would be very satisfying. So why don't we take that conversation more deeply offline? Thank you for your really thoughtful question, especially amidst a highly charged, challenging, and difficult situation for artists, much less for anyone who is not well-to-do. Please.
My name is Teresa, and this question is for Ben and for Liz. Ben, you were talking about remediation, and I was wondering where in the process are you with that? And I think that Liz, your presentation was really funny, but it seems like you also have to go through this process of figuring out what would work. Like you talked about mold, for example. Do you have any other tips or like lessons learned from what you did?
So the question that was asked of both Liz and Ben are very specifically related to the reimagining and actual physical renovation and rehabbing of their particular sites. So did I capture your question? Great.
So the question about remediation at this point, we've gone through phase 1, phase 2, multiple other studies, and basically the way that the situation is, it's in the Duwamish River Valley, which is a super fun site. One of the reasons we had to wait about a year was the EPA wanted to lump us into that Superfund site, which would have been awful because we would have been lumped into this massive thing. But what we've found is that it will cost us a couple $1 million to dig down, build walls, take out the bad dirt, spend a bunch more petroleum getting it to Eastern Oregon, a super wasteful process. And then that doesn't do anything with the spill that's outside of our 5,300 square feet. So what we've been advised by multiple lawyers and consultants is to cap the building with like vapor barrier. But the thing that's unique about the site is that the pollution's so far below the surface that there's no like human hazard, like soil to vapor pathways. And basically there's been a lot of money and time spent to figure out that like, this is just kind of how it is. And it's pretty disappointing to us in one way, and there are like options to do some pumping and treating and whatnot, but that's kind of down the line. But that's where we're at right now.
I would say it's actually really great to hear what other people have been doing for 8 years on end. And one of the things that has been helpful to me is talking to other people that aren't even doing houses as projects, but just talking to people about mistakes that they've made and places that they've wasted money. I would say, especially to an audience of art students, I'm going to say something really unsexy, which is learn how to use a spreadsheet. And right now I have a spreadsheet with every room in the house, with everything I want to do to it. How much does a sheet of drywall cost? If I change the thickness of the drywall, how much is everything, like every piece of hardware, every hour of labor that I might need to do that? And then to start thinking about the back, but then also, and I do this not only in a project like this, but even in an institutional project that I'm working on, because a lot of it is means and ends. Like, can we do that for less than it's meant to cost? And so I spend a lot of time just researching and scheming and trying to figure out if there's a workaround. So I think in a lot of contexts with art, people don't want to talk about economics, but if you work with anything physical whatsoever, or even working with people, other collaborators in performance, and there's invariably labor, travel, and costs. So I think starting to think about the economics of it help frame it.
Thanks. In the back, and I see your hand, Katie, and I see your hand.
Hi, I would be interested in hearing about the role that opposition has played in the work that you've done. And
Jeremy,
hi.
You can introduce yourself.
Sorry, my name is Jeremy Lowe. I'm the Senior Fellow for Arts, Culture, and Equitable Development at Policy Link, which is a national equity, equitable development and advocacy group. But so I guess the question is really, particularly when you get to moments of land and intersections with that, one of the common sort of challenges in the United States is opposition. That you are situated in jurisdictions where you're, it makes very real the sort of question of audience in some way, right? That your audience is not only who chooses to see your work at a gallery or come to a performance, but also who is your neighbor, or is not your neighbor. Or so the question is, like, sort of for each of your work, how does this notion of opposition potentially play into it or not? I can just imagine the idea that if we go out far away from everything, you are specifically addressing sort of opposition away by distance, right? Whereas if you're in a close-in setting, you have a different sort of role or sort of context that you deal with. So how does that show up in the work that you do?
So Jeremy, just so I can distill this, because you should probably be sitting up here chatting. I think I'm hearing for our panelists, our artists, you're asking, in the work that they're doing at the intersection of new work, reimagination, exploration of the intersection of politics, inquiry around community, problem solving, and other things, and because it involves real estate and physical place, are they running into opposition from the immediate community? And how are they grappling with it with regard to their artwork?
Yes, except I would say that in some ways the question is not are they, but what do you sort of how are you handling it, whether or not you are or not, sort of.
And how are you handling
it?
it?
Right.
So that's a really relevant question to us because there is understandably a lot of suspicion by Detroit residents about people coming in from the outside, gentrifying and selling off and leaving. And so we're not just building, we're really, really conscious that we're not just building an architectural form, but that we're also building a sense of community around the project, which is partly why we installed an entirely non-structural version initially. And that involves a time commitment. Staying, learning, and talking to people, keeping those lines of communication open is essential. And part of the struggle, too, as outsiders, to present yourself as someone. Creating trust is an issue. And again, that comes back to the idea of time. Staying and working has seemed to be really effective as people sort of get used to us and understand that we're very serious, dedicated, and trying to do this in as best we can in the right way.
One of the reasons, when I found out I got the Doris Duke Award and that we were going to look to purchase a house in California, I thought that it would make sense to do the project in California and to be able to do kind of like deep mentorship and deep making of home for myself here. So I'm from California, but I actually haven't worked very much in California. I have a lot of deep support here from institutions that are supporting me, like Whitman Institute, IDEX, Thousand Currents, a lot of brilliant friends and people who are movers and shakers out here who are helping me in this project and helping me think through things and are doing labor. But one of the reasons that Minneapolis recircled back, along with the fact that it just was organic because of Lori's passing, is that I have worked there since 1995 and returned there really annually a lot during that time. And they already have a long history of artists as leaders, artists and arts organizations working with the mayor's office, and artists taking charge in figuring out these issues and buying property and going to auctions and getting land and doing public art and all of this. So there are even already established artists who are giving bits of the property. They own property and they're giving bits of their property for emerging artists to build little spaces. So it's early in the process. I'll be able to talk about this much more later. But I jumped in a stream that was already moving. And I get to carry all of this that I have here with me and hopefully return it and do it here as well.
The levels of no's that we've received are just astounding. And we were talking about this earlier, and how many times you get told no, like you can't do it, there's no way, why are you doing this, is enough, like as an artist, to kind of propel you on, like screw you, we're gonna do it, like we're gonna show you. And for better or for worse, I think from sitting in the Department of Planning and Development and going through endless amounts of code to face-to-face meetings with the neighbors who want a 10-foot setback instead of a 5, to just on and on and on. It's just part of the process. And some projects that we do are a little more fluid, and it's been a huge learning experience. I'll just end this comment with a tiny little story. We went to the National Brownfields Conference, and Brownfield is a small site, site that's been used for gas stations, laundromats, whatnot, that has some sort of toxicity on it. And we sat in a small sites conference in the audience, and some executive from Shell was up front. He said,
literally no one is going out on their own and trying to rehab these stations by themselves. Like, no one would ever think to do that. And we just sat in the back. And the next year, John was up in that same panel talking about the project. So it was good. It was just getting those, like, jumping through those hoops. So that was nice.
I would just say offhand, the remoteness in my project, you can get it from certain photographic angles, but it is not totally isolated. And I'm in an area of the desert. About half an hour from me is Joshua Tree, which you may have heard of, which is a long historic artist community. Where I am, it's much more mixed politically, and I believe our representative to Congress is Republican in that area, and particularly this part, the yard signs lend me to think that my politics are in the minority. So I was even thinking actually about like a flag helping identify the house from the road, and was realizing that if I'm not there all the time, that could pose an issue because we're not fully fenced in. But rather than create some huge fence, at every occasion when I'm out there, I think that what you're saying about time is 1,000% like the way to go. Going to the community center to pancake breakfast, going to any house party, like hanging out with the plumber when we had to redo the propane lines like all day and like digging holes, but like asking about the neighbors and like anyone that anyone will introduce me to. I haven't met all of the neighbors there because a lot of people are not there full time. But just trying whenever I have the opportunity to meet someone, I'm like a workaholic, and it took me a while to realize that was like an incredibly important part of the process, but there's no way to shortcut that. And I think you see, if you look at artists that are working with space over long periods of time, the projects that are really sustainable, like I think about someone like Rick Lowe as a real model, that it's just such a long-term investment, and I think the biggest mistake you can make is trying to shortcut that.
I think, Katie, you had a question?
Yeah, this is a question.
Thank you, Jeremy.
From the YouTube live feed. Someone's asking, I guess a couple of people asked about advice you might have around using real estate in your practice as far as acquisition. So purchasing, mistakes you may have learned from in your experience specifically. And hopefully this isn't repetitive, but someone was asking specifically about this.
Who would like to take
Can you repeat the question for the live feed? Because
Oh, I'm sorry. Just so I understand, thank you. So there is a person who's asking specific questions about advice on those that are working in their practice with actual purchase of space. Might our artist have particular advice or tips? Yes?
I mean, this was a slow process for us, so we had the benefit of meeting environmental lawyers who were pro bono, and the help with Creative Capital, and just slowly getting like a team of people around us to give us the right advice. And then we ended up using a cultural facilities grant to use that money to purchase the property. And that has all sorts of stipulations where it's going to be this cultural institution for, and I think the latest one was, it's only 10 years, but we are obviously making this to be around for a lot longer. But yeah, I mean, honestly, just getting advice by professionals was a huge help for us.
I think getting beyond the where people are looking way beyond and way ahead, where other people are, but then also if I was constrained by space and time in some sense, and it was the real estate broker I was working with was someone that friends had worked with before, was sort of saying, you're racing against this market going up, and I think taking your time as much as you can is highly advised, and I was frankly fearing being priced out of California for the project. And I think, but the other thing that I would say to counter that is, having talked to financial professionals as well, there are, even if you think you have terrible credit, you're an artist, your life is a mess, there are actually ways to finance things. And there are also initiatives like Brioxy, and there are different community development initiatives that can help, and trying to identify those resources, I think is a really great way to go, but also thinking about collective ownership, or even, I do think one of the things that has become clear to me are watching spaces that, that were accessible to me during the financial crisis, or like somehow maybe I should have figured it out, that like one of the things kind of underpinning the project is kind of the whole community of artists I work in. Like anyone that has not bought real estate may never buy real estate in our city, and may eventually never, the community that we have, like half of us may be driven out at some point. So I think the time question is I think wait as much as you can and just get as much knowledge as you can, but I think it's a really important thing for artists to be able to figure out, because it is a question of long-term viability for our practices.
Sir?
To the ownership of equity as artists, and I applaud all of you for sort of cracking that nut and purchasing your property and having a longer-term view. My question has to do with, what is your operating model now that you're going to be, you own these properties? How do you plan to sustain them, and what is your long-term, vision and operating plan?
So, long-term vision and operating plans happen on many levels. So we've established a land trust in community with 3 other organizations, and then the 3 of us who are part of the main sort of facilitators of the collective. But we're also really interested in sociocultural sustainability. And so we're thinking about partnering with pre-existing educational institutions for the skills training. The water catchment system is about environmental sustainability. And so what I'm trying to say with that is that partnerships are essential to that sustainability. The more people have real stakes in a project, the more effort is being put into it. And it takes a lot of people.
We're kind of operating on a if you build it, they will come mentality for this whole project. But we formed a nonprofit in order to purchase the property, and the outside is going to kind of be this park area. The inside, we will do another round of fundraising, basically. And our dream is to have a curator and someone who runs it, and eventually kind of like hand it off. But we realize that probably for the first 3 to 5 years, the 3 of us will be running it, putting on shows. And this space will definitely be more active in the summertime compared to Seattle winters. But we've spent so much time believing in this thing that we know that we're going to just spend the time to go the next round with fundraising and getting an operating budget. Might not be the smartest way to do it, but that's what we're doing.
It's realistic. Questions? I see your hand, and then in the back.
A question for any of you, and I'm not quite sure how to frame it, but it's about a responsibility, and on the one hand, and about the creative spirit, experimentalism, and impermanence and youth in the art world, and putting those 2 together. And I'm referencing like the ghost ship tragedy seems to have these elements that people involved were not knowledgeable or aware of or capable of responsibility for their own situation, where they're forging outside the boundaries of sort of the nanny society, nanny type society, and making their own way and having the tools for your own responsibility. So if you have any comments about how you blend or deal with that.
Could you repeat that?
I'm sorry?
Repeat that.
Of course. I thought he spoke in his outdoor voice, so it was heard. So I think it wasn't a question, but an observation that you would like us to comment on. Is that what I heard?
How do you think about that? And the main thing is you're all undertaking very responsible roles that are just very responsible roles to create this. And the art, part of the ethos of art is not about responsibility. And how does that fit together?
So I think that you're asking, if I've summed this correctly, that you're comparing the nature of purchasing, acquiring, holding on in trust, space, real estate, and the nature of essentially the making of work and its ephemeralness, and that it seems there is a structural tension, and how do we navigate that in each of our respective work. Did I capture it?
I heard something about the risk inherent in owning property.
Thank you.
And collapse and responsibility for the property.
And I think I will add to it, thank you, that embedded in that is how do you manage risk not only in the making of work, but also the risk involved in and responsibility in finding, holding on, and operating property. Did we capture it? Okay. Answer that in 25 words. No, kidding.
I'll confess that pyramid, the image of that I showed, that was unpermitted, but I consulted a structural engineer to confirm that it was structurally sound and safe. The work that I'm going to do at the site on the property that I own will be permitted, but I deliberately selected somewhere in where there are alternative land use regulations, and the building code is very open. That said, we're in California. There are earthquakes. On some sites, there's a possibility of flooding, and I feel like as artists orchestrating these projects, like we bear the responsibility of making the space safe on just the most basic level. I mean, I just think about it as a host. Like if someone comes to my house for dinner, that I want them to feel comfortable, or like for people to engage the site as much as there's a lot that I want to do there that you can't do in a conventional white box space, and that's part of the point. But there needs to be a basic level of health and safety. Otherwise, you're putting people in danger in a way that's kind of not, I don't feel ethically okay about.
Definitely agree with all of that. And I'll respond to sort of one other aspect of the question that I heard, and that's the tension between this very serious work that might look more like urban planning or real estate development, and less like these more open models of art making. And that reality is just that this kind of work, it lives in a gray area. We're both. And sometimes we have the hat of landlord on, and sometimes we have the hat of, artsy troublemaker. And a lot of that comes in through the programming at these sites and what it even means to do something like establish a riad in the middle of a U.S. city. And that's always something that's in fluid, that's in flux, that's fluid, yes.
I think of a simple spectrum, and there's like street performance and coating yourself in the color and running out into the street and having fun, and then there's bronze casting, and there's painting, and there's it's just this walk towards that other end. We do a lot of public art, and we're working on something for the city of Bellevue right now and Capitol Hill in Seattle, and it's meetings, and it's structural engineers, and it's testing materials, and it's boring, compared to that other kind. But it's really satisfying when you can realize these things, and it's over here, or wherever that is in the spectrum. It's just different, and you use a different part of your brain, you use a different part of your meeting skills and note taking, and it's just part of the practice now. I never ever would have thought that, like going to art school and growing up painting and doing sculpture. It's a very different way of making art, but it's also really satisfying.
I think the person in the back, I see Hesse, and
So I have a question about scale and replicability. Like, I see so much creativity in each of your projects throughout your process. And as you said, you have developed these skills that are in non-creative areas as developers who are also artists. So I wanted to ask, for any of you who want to answer, how you think about whether your project could be repeated, it could be scaled and therefore invested in, or on the flip side, how important is the singularity of your project as part of your creative practice?
so it sounds like the two-part question, if I'm hearing this correctly, is that you're asking our panelists, with regard to their current work, what is the potential for scalability and replication, and what is the implication of that, as well as, is there something much more unique in it not being replicated, and it's important for it to be on its own and to be uniquely singular?
Well, we've always imagined that there were mini mart city parks all over the nation. And I mean, it's using that gas station, the franchise model of like, and knowing that there are so many of these that have these linking underground tanks and problems that need to be fixed. I think it would be an amazing partnership with Big Oil, with some of those companies that actually have the titles that they're sitting, to come in with like a packet and turn it into a park. And kind of each site would be unique for what the structure is, but that's always been a dream of ours for that project.
That's something that I'm actually thinking a lot about right now. Of course, I'll know more later, but in this moment, one of my questions is, for myself, is as we move forward, do we try to acquire or build the house everywhere we go, or do we just tour kind of a blueprint of the project and the performance installation? I lean towards doing the actual artist house in Minneapolis, creating a blueprint, which for me includes, lots of documentation, video, interviews, getting professionals to help us kind of write out and share in multiple platforms what it is that happens, but touring the installation and using that as a way to invite conversation and trainings around the country. Because it feels like, I was telling Sean, I feel like a carpenter ant right now. It feels like huge to just move forward to do the one. But I do want the work to live, and I'm very committed to the connection, the healing, the conversations, and the art. And participating in changing the landscape of who gets to have.
Great question, thank you. Hesse?
Sure. I wanted to, that's close. I wanted to tease out something from your question, which I sort of saw a different way, which, if I could rephrase, is maybe, are you pro Thomas Hirschhorn or not? And the critique of Hirschhorn is often that it's not responsible. And he would say, I don't have to be responsible, I'm an artist. I'm doing something else. So, are you guys following this? I'm just curious about your perspectives on that, because I think the interesting aspect of your question was to assert that artists have a right to be more freewheeling, more raffish. They don't have to adhere to a kind of always replicable and scalable model.
That's an interesting way to put it, to have a right, but then if you take your right, what are you enabled to do and not kill yourself?
I want to respond to the issue of scale, actually, because I think particularly thinking about the last couple decades of contemporary art, I'm suspicious of scale as value and spectacle as value. And for the projects that I do, and I was actually having trouble kind of coming up with an answer to the idea of scalability, because for me, when I think about the projects that I do, they're incredibly intimate, they're awkward, and they're very much produced, they live primarily in the experience of the people that are present and experience them firsthand. So I imagine that I will do other projects on a scale like that, but it's less about creating a model and more, I'm definitely doing them in response to the fact that other artists have done other projects, but each one is kind of inherently its own animal, but also responding to the political moment of the time, or the economic situation of the time. And so I feel like thinking about something that is context responsive, in the case of Hirshhorn, I recently saw a rare instance in which one of his works traveled out of context, and it wasn't nearly as good as the ones that were built in a specific context with a direct interaction with the community around it.
I guess I could say maybe one more thing about that. It's in terms of engineering structural stability and relationships to community members, responsibility is very important to us. But it's also interesting to be cognizant and ready to act when art opens up a door. When someone doesn't know what you may or may not do because you're not a developer, you're not an urban planner, you're an artist. And to just be ready to work in that space of openness.
Beautifully put. The lady in the beautiful golden jacket.
So I'm very fascinated by this conversation because it centers actual physical space. And I'm very passionate about building power from the ground up. And I am thinking about asset building within this failing capitalist system within the context of the US, and wondering if there's any intentionality behind reimagining an alternative financial system alongside your art with the projects that you're building.
So I think I heard that the question is, given the context, that is there an opportunity to bring into the making of work and their practice an examination and an inquiry on the financial system?
One of the reasons I'm so excited about offering workshops and community gatherings is specifically around that. So to demystify home buying, to demystify financial planning, to use our own brilliance that is at hand in our own communities, our own intelligence and self-determination, as opposed to waiting for somebody to make that happen for us. So for the skill building, the knowledge sharing in intimate spaces and larger spaces, so that we can change things for ourselves, by ourselves, in the way that we want them to be.
Well said.
Mic drop. I think we have time for one more question. If not, I turn to you fabulous artists. Oh my God. So inspired by you. Closing remarks, 2 sentences. We'll start from you, Liz.
One of the things that's been really incredible for me in the last year is just being a part of the community of creative capital artists and thinking about this tension between the practical and the poetic or radical. Being in a group of artists that are thinking really big about the political stakes in what we're doing is one of the things that I've gotten a lot out of, kind of stepping out and thinking, what are we trying to do here? And how can we do it better?
I feel that this is a critical time for us to come together and dream and eat and dance, and I said earlier to cuss, and in our own wonky ways figure out how to be together and how to support each other in whatever it is that we are doing and need to do across all these constructs that have kept us separate for so long. Art is a beautiful way to open those doors because it gets beyond these thick heads that we have. So.
Like I mentioned in the presentation, the American Riyadh project was a bucket list project for us. And for a very long time, we thought this would just simply be an impossibility until we found out that it wasn't impossible and it could be done. And so that's my advice. Don't be afraid to dream really big. And actually something else that I learned at a Creative Capital workshop years ago when I was still in Houston, Texas, someone said, how are you ever going to be able to do it if you don't know what it takes? And I thought that was really interesting. That was a sign that I needed to make that spreadsheet and know exactly what was going to be needed as best I could at every stage. And then once it was laid out in front of me, I knew how to attack it. So go for it.
I guess I'll just end with thanking Creative Capital for organizing this. And when I think back to our early parts of our career and dreaming big and knowing what we wanted to do, this organization came in and changed our lives. And every one of us here has had our life totally altered by this awesome organization. And there needs to be more of them as well. So thank you very much, Creative Capital.
So, without further ado, thank you. Let's thank our artist again. Liz, Sharon, Carmen, Ben. Thank you for your fearlessness. Thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for continuing to question and sharing with us your work as well as the narrative, the story behind. Thank you for joining us in San Francisco Art Institute's big living room. Good night.